application security threats keep evolving, and if you're still relying on outdated vulnerability lists, you are leaving your organization exposed. OWASP just rolled out significant updates to their top 10 list. And here is what's really interesting. They have added two entirely new lists to the mix. So, what changed, and more importantly, what does this mean for your security strategy? That's exactly what we are going to find out in this episode of CISO Insights with Steve Winterfeld, Advisory CISO at Akamai. Steve, before we talk about these lists, for those of our viewers who are new, speaking of new year, let's talk about what is OWASP and what role it plays in the strategies that security teams build.
Certainly. So, at Akamai here, we do a lot of things where we're out protecting the edge through our web application firewall, our API firewall, our Gen AI firewall. And all of these are built around the fact that there are tons of cyber criminals and hackers and hacktivists using all these malicious techniques to try to break in or take down different sites. And we talk a lot about these in our State of the Internet cybersecurity reports. But one of the organizations and I'm advising you, our viewers, to leverage is called OWASP, the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. So this started back in 2001. There are 60 chapters around the world. So if you're in a city, you may, look around and see if there's a local OWASP chapter. There are over 30,000 volunteers, so it's an activity you can go if you want to build your resume, build your skills. You can go get involved with. So it's certainly a place to go network with your peers as well. Something I'm a huge fan of. But this group is saying, okay, if as a CISO, I have a $10 budget and $20 worth of problems. So I have to be very careful about what I'm going to fix. And I want the largest return on investment. So what this community has done is said, listen, if you can fix 10 vulnerabilities, just 10, these are the 10 you should fix, because these are the most common techniques used by hackers. And so, if I just go get rid of these 10, huge return on investment. I'm taking out, and I'm making this number up, but over 50% of the attacks by taking out these 10. And so what are these lists? The first list was a top 10 for web application security risk. And that stayed around. It didn't change forever, 10, 15 years probably. And so it was a bit frustrating because I'm like, we're not making progress. But, it was great in that if you fix those 10, you were in great shape. And that's been changing over time. The next and this isn't the next that came out, but the next that we have a lot of data on here at Akamai was around API security. And so that came out, and it changed after just a couple years. And then one came out for large language models or generative AI, and that changed after just 1 year. And now there's one out there for generative AI. And so Gen AI is answering questions. Generative AI is making decisions. Way oversimplified, but that's it. There are over a dozen of these lists. And some of this depends on your business models. There's a great one for mobile phones. If you're in a low-code environment or if you produce Internet of Things, there are lists for those. There are cheat sheets. So if it's something I encourage you to go get educated on and understand which of these top 10 lists you would get a return on investment from using.
Now let's talk about these updates. OWASP added two new lists on top of the traditional top 10. Walk us through what these new lists are and why OWASP felt the need to expand beyond the original framework.
The most common we have out there is our web pages out there, interactive web pages. And so those web apps, it's changed this year. It changed last year. It had been in place for about 4 years. There's a new one around software supply chain features and a new vulnerability around mishandling of exceptional conditions. And so this is where you want to go make sure that you're now adding those two to the ones you focus on fixing. If you were using the old list, now you've still want, I wouldn't drop the two that fell off because they're now 11 and 12 probably, but I would make sure that I had updated my security processes and strategy to make sure I'm fixing those. Um, the next model that came out was, we said, large language models. And so this one came out, and what we see here is this changed after a year. And when it changed, there were four new threats, and three of them had been renamed or recategorized. And so what we see is an evolution in two things. One, an evolution as practitioners say, we didn't get that right. People are confused. Let's rename it. Let's get a more crisp, better name around that. And then the second part of that is it's really around, what fell off. And so in this case, DDoS is one that fell off the original list. Now it's still a threat. It's still something we need to pay attention to, but they didn't consider it to be critical enough to be in the top 10. So again, this is a balancing of valid threats, but is it going to give you the highest return on investment? Another one that mobile phones had been out there for 8 years. It recently got updated last year, and most of that was a restructuring on categories. And then finally, a brand new one, not just new, but brand new, never before been out there, similar to large language models that had been recently created, APIs that had been recently created. And this is around agentic AI. And so because these systems are autonomous, they can move plans, they can interface with customers, they can make decisions about, a customer getting approved for a loan or something like that, potentially, depending on your business model. And so these are fairly powerful. They go across multiple environments. And now I'm trying to abuse the business logic. I'm trying to get it to make bad decisions. And so again, most of these need new tools. I'm protecting my web apps with tool A. I'm protecting APIs with tool B, my large language model with tool C. And this one is going to be interesting to see if it's more of a tool or more processes. But it's definitely something we want to get educated on and make sure we have protections around. Because these hackers are going in and changing chain reactions. They're amplifying failures beyond a single prompt, and we just need to be able to make sure we have visibility and remediation in place.
What I'm curious about after listening to you is for security teams that have been using the original OWASP top 10 as their North Star, how should they integrate these two new lists into their existing security programs? Is this an addition to their workflow or does it require a fundamental shift?
So, I mean, a lot of that depends on how they're organized. If the same people are doing the web pages, that are doing APIs, that are doing your large language models, then you can integrate it into your current program. Just say, hey, as you shift from working on project A to project B, make sure you're looking for these vulnerabilities and using these best practices. If you have teams, three separate teams doing those kind of things, then you're going to need to focus on the one new team that's doing the tool you're working on. If it's mobile, if it's agentic AI, if it's large language models. And so a lot of that depends on it, how you're organized. So I'll tell you how I use these tools. So the first is kind of a threat lens. So if I just said it earlier, I now hear the agentic AI is a focus area for cyber criminals and hacktivists. So I'm going to ask myself, in my security program, Do I have security controls that are going to make sure my portfolio is safe, that I'm protecting our revenue? Again, how important is agentic AI to my business? If I'm in manufacturing, it may or may not be. If I'm in IoT, if I'm in, retail, it all depends on if we're leaning into it. But this is where I have to work closely with my business partners to understand where are we using large language models, where are we using APIs, where are we starting to use agentic AI, and then I need to start training. You know, one of my favorite stories to share, I think I've shared it with you a couple times already, is, the classic. I have my SOC engineer going to a, DevOps person and saying, you have to install File Integrity Manager. Well, that doesn't pass the common sense test. It doesn't work like that. So we need to educate our security people and our developers to understand how to avoid these. If there's local file inclusion, if we don't do that coding error in our development, then we're not going to have a problem. And then I need my vulnerability management team to scan for it. I need to do it in testing and in a live environment. And so I need to be looking for these top 10 vulnerabilities as a starting point. Obviously, I'm not going to stop there, but that gives me the ability to train and then validate and track. I want to work with supply management. I want supply management to be going and asking these questions of the people that are supplying us. What are they doing for API security, for large language model security? How are they securing theirs? I look in this earlier, and I think I mentioned this, is, validation data is if I don't have visibility. So if I look at my data and I'm not seeing anything around a couple of the top 10, or in this case of we said there are 2 new ones for, just web apps, then I need to find out why. Is it because we don't use that function, or because my security controls weren't designed to catch those issues? And then finally, I use these for my penetration testing teams, my red team, blue team exercises. I'm like, go use these top 10 to attack us to see if we're vulnerable. So there's a spectrum across training, execution, validation that I think these tools can be used.
Now let's get practical. You are an advisory CISO at Akamai. When you are working with organizations, how do you recommend they actually use these lists? Because there is a difference between having a checklist and building a real security strategy around it.
So I think a lot of this goes back to, as I said earlier, we want to make sure, first of all, are we using this? Is this a tool in our tool bag? If we're training on this, then I would like to go and talk with them about, okay, so in our last scan, we found, I'll go back to the one vulnerability I mentioned earlier, local file inclusion. We found, 5 vulnerabilities for that. Is that all from one developer? Is that from 4 different developers? Do we have a hole in our training? And so I want to walk that back and get rid of that root cause. I want to do root cause analysis of why I'm seeing the number of vulnerabilities I'm seeing. And so that would be probably the first thing I would do. The second thing I would want to do is I would want to go in and then make sure that we are doing more around validation. Are we testing? Are we sending the developers to classes? Am I sending my SOC analysts to classes? Am I developing and buying the right tools? Am I working with my vendor management? And how are we validating that? Is it just through a questionnaire? Are we demanding attestation like a SOC 2? Those would be some of the typical things that we would go kind of a level deeper to more maturity.
At Akamai, you are dealing with massive scale and diverse threat landscapes. How does Akamai use these OWASP lists internally, and do you see them as foundational to your security approach, or more or less one tool among many others?
I kind of take these as we're putting out our capabilities to protect our partners, our customers, as a great reference tool. And so it almost goes hand in hand. When the API top 10 list came out, is at the same time my customers are asking, Akamai, help us protect against API threats. You know, what are you doing for large language models? We're starting to move into that. What are your capabilities around that? So it gives us a chance then to say, well, here's what we're doing for APIs, and then we can say, we're using the OWASP top 10, and we cover, you know, let's say 7 of the top 10 are technical, and the other 3 are administrative. We're covering the 7 technical aspects of the top 10, and so we're giving you visibility and remediation around that. We're right now in the middle of working with them on our generative AI firewall. And so that AI firewall is the same thing. As these lists come out, then we're working with our customers and making sure they're protected. So it's an amazing tool. We appreciate all the volunteers out there doing all that. It gives us a chance to make sure we're doing the right thing for our customer.
Beyond OWASP, what other industry best practice frameworks or tools you think security teams should be paying attention to? If I may ask, what's in your toolbox?
It's hard to get excited about compliance and all this paperwork. The top 10 is actually a little more easy to get excited about. It's right there in the mix of the fight. The first thing I would say is I if depending on what industry I'm in, I do want to be compliant. I want to do what's right for my customer, even if I'm not in a compliance-driven industry. So there are regulations around privacy. GDPR out of the Europe is a great example. So, you know, again, I'm a huge fan of plagiarism. Somebody smarter than me's done most of what I'll do in my career. So I can go leverage this. Um, Another thing is, the EU Act. As I'm trying to write my first AI policy, I can go use the EU AI Act, and it has, categories of unacceptable all the way down to negligible risk. And so I can use that as kind of a framework for my policy. I can also go somewhere. I live in Colorado. Colorado is one of the first states to come out with an AI law. And so I can go there and I can look and say, okay, they're mostly concerned about AI that can have an impact on the customer. So healthcare or finance where it's making a decision on me being able to get a loan are examples. And so I think these are great places to work with your legal team, or if you're in a smaller company, just to do a little light reading and a place to move your strategy forward by standing on the shoulders of others. There are great industry standards, and here are some that actually you can get an attestation from. Have a third party come in and test you. If you are in the energy sector, it's NERC SIP. If you're doing credit cards, it's PCI DSS. If you have investors, it's probably something like a SOC 2. You can use ISO 2700 to get certified in. The Cloud Security Association has a controls matrix stars. FedRAMP again for cloud environment. Obviously for U.S. government systems. So there are a number of regulatory or semi-regulatory standards that you can go leverage. Here in the United States, probably the number one standard is NIST 800 series. By far, the NIST 800 security framework is a great place to go get stuff. Most of the federal regulations are derivatives of that standard. So if you're in banking or something else, it's probably coming out of those. If you use Zero Trust, it's NIST 800-207 is a specific document you would go use to build your Zero Trust framework. Some other industry best practices, I really like the MITRE ATT&CK framework. There are 14 tactics and over 200 techniques. It's spread across enterprise, industrial control systems, and mobile. And it's really something you can go apply. Another one is CSI, the Center for Internet Security. It's if you're a smaller company, it just gives you 20 controls to start with. And that's kind of your security portfolio in a bag. You're just set. And you've got something if an auditor or if you get in a class action lawsuit, you can point to the best practices you're using.
Looking ahead, as threats keep evolving, AI-driven attacks, supply chain vulnerabilities, all of that, did you see OWASP is keeping up with that? Where do you think these lists need to go next?
It is hard to be agile or to move at internet or cyber speed. You know, I need to build up some time. So large language models start to be used. Well, there's a tipping point where enough of them are out there that I can start gathering data. And then I start gathering data and correlating what are the most common attacks. And then I have to turn around and as a committee write these. And so we've always got this lag. You know, I really think it's important for you out there to belong to any organizations you can to lean forward. You know, if you're going to your local OWASP chapter, you're going to find out before the final regulation is out. If you're a member of FBI's InfraGard, you're going to get, you know, data earlier. If there's just a lot of things, you know, if you're in an industry that has an ISAC, financial services information sharing group, you know, if your bank or financial institution belongs to that, get involved there and get in early on it. You know, the standards are always going to be slower. I think where you're talking is I spent a lot of time reading things like Akamai's State of the Internet Cybersecurity Reports. And I'm going to see a shift in attack trends there before I see it in the standards. So I pay attention to threat intel as well for more emerging threats.
Steve, thank you so much for joining me and breaking down these OWASP updates. The key takeaway here is that security teams need to expand their view beyond just web apps. These new lists give them a broader framework to work with. And as usual, I look forward to chatting with you again. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great one. Bye.
And for those watching, if you are trying to level up your application security strategy, make sure to check out Akamai and its solutions. And don't forget to subscribe to TFIR, like this video, and share it with your team. Thanks for watching.